First then, to the soaring tensions between the United States and Venezuela. American forces yesterday seized an oil tanker off the Venezuelan coast. It's a major escalation in Donald Trump's 4-month campaign to pressure the dictator of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro. Today, his government has called the seizure an act of international piracy. Well, let's start then by listening to Trump himself.
As you probably know, we've just seized a tanker on the coast of Venezuela, a large tanker, very large. Largest one ever seized, actually. And other things are happening, so.
And with me now is our regional correspondent, Tim Vickery, who joins us from Rio de Janeiro in neighbouring Brazil. Tim, good to talk to you today about all of this. What's your sense as to why we are seeing this significant ramping up of pressure from the White House now?
Well, this has nothing to do with the war on drug trafficking, which has been the justification of the United States for much of this build-up against Venezuela. We can discount that for two reasons. Firstly, the Americans' own drug enforcement agency says that Venezuela is not a major player in the narco-traffic industry. And also, President Trump has just issued a pardon to the former president of Honduras, President Hernandez, who was doing a 45-year sentence in the United States for his involvement in a massive cocaine smuggling ring. So this isn't about principle, it's about power. And it's about the pivot of the United States away from a Middle East, Europe approach to a home-based approach, an America's approach. It's just over 200 years since the then President Monroe announced the doctrine that bears his name, which essentially was a message to other powers: Latin America is ours. In 2013, under the Obama administration, the Secretary of State, John Kerry, said that the Monroe Doctrine was dead. It was over. It is now back with an absolute vengeance. And what the United States are trying to do here is counter the rise of China in the region. China is a major trade partner, an increasing trade partner of many of these Latin American countries. So with this America's first approach, this Monroe Doctrine approach, what the states are seeking to do is limit the influence of China and also limit the access of China to Latin American raw materials, especially pertinent in oil-rich Venezuela, where it seems the priority of the Trump administration is regime change. Military intervention, I think, would be a last resort. The first resort would be some kind of oil blockade, and maybe we're seeing the first steps towards that.
All right, so possible regime change, you say. You are in neighbouring Brazil. Give us a sense how the government there and perhaps also governments elsewhere in Latin America are viewing what we're seeing in Venezuela.
Well, the regional response is fragmented. Now, this is part of a historical pattern of disunity in Latin America. So often, historically, the countries exporters of raw materials, they had trade deals with the outside world, but not trade deals with each other. And so there is clearly the possibility here for the United States to play divide and rule. And here in Brazil, Trump's recent attempts to interfere in domestic Brazilian politics so far have proved unsuccessful. Argentina, though, a very, very different story. The administration of President Milei there would probably have collapsed, may well have collapsed without US support. So in an age where multilateralism is on the way down and might is right is on the way up, it would seem that it will be relatively easy for the US to play power games, picking off the South American nations politically one at a time.
All right, Tim Vickery there in Rio de Janeiro. Really good to talk to you about all of this.